So we'll go ahead and officially get started today because we have two really excellent guests to tell us about our topic that we'll have for 2 weeks now about diversity in Ukraine in lots of regards. And this isn't an issue that doesn't get a lot of attention. And of course, the coverage of the war in Ukraine, I say of course, but maybe that's not an of course, but that doesn't get, people don't fully appreciate the diversity of the population of Ukraine. And that's part of what we're trying to bring attention to this Friday and also next Friday. So I'll start with my normal introduction of this webinar series as being organized by Jeffrey Glenn with the Peace Corps Virtual Service, Roman Oleksenko, a community project manager based in Kyiv, Olga Nikolska with isar.ednannia, an NGO based in Kyiv, Ukraine, and also by myself, Sarah Wilson-Soki. I'm at the University of Colorado, Boulder. The series is co-sponsored by PONARS Eurasia at George Washington University, isar.ednannia in Kyiv, and the University of Colorado, Boulder. As you can see in the chat, and most of you already know because you're regular attendees, you can ask questions and engage using the Q&A function on Zoom. The chat's disabled for attendees for security reasons. And you can always email questions and comments to me during the webinar too, if you're having any technical issues. So today we have Viktor Pylypenko, Ukrainian veteran and civic activist and head of the NGO Ukrainian LGBT Military for Equal Rights. We also have Ayder Khalilov, a senior program manager with the international organization Pact, which works in Ukraine and in a number of other countries around the world. I'll turn things over now to our moderator for today, to Roman Oleksenko, who will give a more proper introduction for our guests and get our conversation started.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Ayder and Viktor, for joining today, for agreeing to be our speakers. I'd have to say that it's been so easy to arrange for this session with you. It was easy, it took one question from me to ask you if you would agree to participate, and instantly you responded yes. So thank you for being so flexible and accommodating. In addition to that, I'm proud to call both of you my friends. We've known each other for several years, and that's probably, you couldn't resist my charms, trying to, stay away from this gig. But I'm glad you did not ignore me. So, how was your day so far? It's a trick question. I did not include it in the cheat sheet.
Yeah, you mean today or these days?
Yes. You can think of the week. I mean, for me, a day.
Oh, okay. Nowadays it's crazy for me personally and for our project, because we do have a lot of now projects going on in Ukraine, and trying to catch up and to do our best in order to to deliver as much as possible to support Ukraine, to support Ukrainians in their fight against Russia, and also to support civil society, because this is one of the main pillar of Ukraine independence and Ukraine being sovereign country, that we have strong civil society who is actually making sure that democracy is still in place, reforms are happening despite the war, and civil society is watching over the state in order to be sure that we are part of the civilized society.
Wow, I just asked you how you're doing, and you give me a speech that inspires everyone. Oh, that's okay. That's fine. That's fine. That's how every Ukrainian I know responds these days to the question, "How are you?"
Yep.
So yeah,
thank you.
Thank you for that, Viktor. What about yourself?
Well, today's day I spent together with my team of our non-government organization. Today we were dealing with we were publishing a report regarding all the donations LGBT community made to the Ukrainian military. So today it was published, and you can see it on our Instagram, other social media pages. Yeah, we are doing this type of reports every month. Yeah, so today I was busy with my team, We were also doing an interview with a novice, a guy who wants to join our team as well. Yeah, and and that's all.
Yeah, well, you already sound like a double hero to me, because for having submitted the report, that's something that I dread all the time. Anyway, yeah, well, Viktor, I want to take use the opportunity to thank you for your service. I know we've been friends, but your story inspires me, and I'm sure thousands of other Ukrainians. And I want to personally thank you for what you've done to defend Ukraine and me and my family. So thank you. I would like to start off with the usual question. This question has become sort of like a traditional question to ask of every speaker before we dive into the topic. What's the Ukrainian victory for you? How do you see Ukraine's victory? Do you see it at all? I mean, we as of lately, I keep hearing lots of pessimistic reports and pessimistic predictions about how this war is going to end. So, but I still want to go back to us feeling, optimistic about Ukraine's victory. So, what's Ukrainian victory for you?
Okay, I'll start then. For me, I consider this war as not only as a geopolitical war, right? It's not a war about territories only. It is a war about values. It's a war about survival. It's a war about, genocide. So that's why I believe that our victory, when we will be sure that Ukraine does have own territory, which borders, what year borders, we believe that it's going to be 1991. But the main, for me, that we keep our state and we keep our people and we keep our values. This is the main, for me, what's the victory of Ukraine would be. So if we will stay as we are with our vision, with our independence, with our values, because history of my, people, my nation, and in interactions with Russians, this is a great example how you first they first conquer you, and after that they just just make you disappear as a nation, and from a couple of millions you become a very, very, very small nation without everything. So that's the issue with Ukraine as well right now. So they will never stop. And for us, victory means that we should ensure that we keep our track as a democratic nation, as a sovereign nation, and if possible, to get our land back. So basically this, because for me personally, when Crimea is back, Ukraine wins. So not other territories as well, other people as well, but Crimea is a kind of valuable part of Ukraine. And for me, victory is Ukraine back, that Crimea is back, and our values, our European path is actually in place.
Thank you for saying that, Ayder. And then, I want the audience to take a moment to recognize the plight of the Crimean Tatars, which are native to the Crimea. They basically lost their land several times, the most recently starting 2014. So Ayder no longer can go back to his homeland.
Yeah.
And that's what actually that what can potentially happen to the rest of Ukraine and the rest of Ukrainians.
Yeah.
Keep that in perspective. Thank you, Ayder.
Thanks.
Viktor, what's your take on Ukraine's victory? Your name is a Viktor. I mean, you gotta be like, hey man, I'm gonna be the one putting up a Ukrainian flag in the Kremlin.
Yeah. Well, I share everything Ayder told, and regarding values of democracy, of a democratic state, as well as I share his opinion regarding Crimea. A return of Crimea to Ukraine is not only a return of territories, it is a return of an international law order. So Russia breached the post Second World War world's order by annexing Crimea. So it is crucial for this order to be restored. Yeah, and it will be restored fully only when Crimea will return back to Ukraine, not as a territory, yeah, but as an order, world's order. Yeah, for me, victory will be when the enemy will be. For me, victory will come when the enemy will be driven out from my country, and my country will become a civilized European democratic state. Yeah, and it is possible only when we will be fully independent and all our territories will be sovereign, will be free.
Thank you, Viktor. And I'm tempted to pry even deeper, like, because you've had experience fighting the Russians in the battlefield. You know that even if Ukraine deoccupies its territories, the threat is not gonna disappear. Russia is always gonna be up there, you know? So how do we say it's finally victory? Like the victory has arrived.
Well, when every 2 meters of our border will be covered by patriots, you know, yeah. So,
Patriots, you mean like the
and aircraft defense systems, I mean, because you know Russia is mad. It is like to live to get near Russia is like to live near North Korea, you know. Yeah, so you cannot expect anything sane from such a neighbor. Yeah, so maybe we will drive out the enemy out of our country, but who knows what will happen next? Yeah, in couple of years. So I think that we should be protected by air defense systems. Yeah, and only this is the only solution how we can develop as a normal, free, democratic state. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
And
thank
of course, to be we need to be accepted into NATO. Yeah, that's the only solution. We need to be protected by the atomic bomb umbrella of NATO. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wish the NATO takes seriously what we think of them, you know, because so far we've only heard interesting declarations, not supported by anything substantial from them. Anyway, shifting gears, as you know, our topic today is diversity, and I would like for our guests to tell us what it is that you all should know about them. How many identities do you have? Ayder, would like to start with you.
Yeah, despite my social identities that I'm father, I don't know that I have friends and brothers and I'm part of, larger community of relatives. My, main identity that I'm Crimean Tatar by ethnicity, and I'm citizen of Ukraine by my citizenship and being, part of Ukrainian political nation. And this is main identities of mine. Then I am also, I'm working for international organization here, and this is another identity, and we are kind of you know, working in a bubble, I would say, of internationals here, because there are a lot of people, different people who are arriving to Kiev and Ukraine to see what's going on here and support us. And this is part of my work identity, right? But overall, I'm Crimean Tatar. I'm coming from Muslim community, and I am Ukrainian from another side. And I don't see any contradictions with this, several personalities or I don't know, identities in my life. I see myself and feel myself comfortable with Ukrainian passport, with Ukrainian friends, Orthodox friends, always saying me that see Muslim celebrations is coming and saying hello every day. So I don't even imagine that something is now not right. I mean, with my identities in Ukraine.
Thank you for saying that. That's really important, and we'll get back to what you just said in a minute.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Victor, what about yourself? What should we know about you?
Well, first of all, I am Ukrainian. And I mean like a political Ukrainian, because my ethnicity, I'm not like 100% ethnically Ukrainian. I have Greek roots, I have Lithuanian roots, and Ukrainian roots as well. But I call myself Ukrainian, a citizen of this country, a Democrat. Also, I'm openly a gay person. I'm a veteran as well. So all of these identities are in me. Yeah, and that's all. What else to say? Being a gay man is one of the one of my identities, which I need, um, which I'm proud of. Yeah, which I'm proud of stating that I'm gay openly. Doing it in my country, I know that when I'm opening one of these of my identities to the society, I'm changing my Ukrainian society. It's like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. One trivia fact that some of our attendees may appreciate, especially those who've served in Ukraine as Peace Corps volunteers, is that Viktor's sister used to be a counterpart for a Peace Corps volunteer for a very brief moment before the evacuation during the COVID times. And it was great to get to know her. And I did not know she was his sister. That's the thing. And only later did I find out through the Facebook, through social media, that there's like, I can connect the dots, and then you're brother of a sister, and the sister is a counterpart. So a small world. So thank you. Please, next time to talk to your sister, please tell hello. Thank you. So okay, in the context of diversity, there are many misconceptions, in my opinion. There are many misconceptions and narratives that exist around the world about Ukraine. And as I was advertising this event on the social media, I allowed myself to explore some of the narratives that exist in the North, in the East, and in West. So our enemies have been calling us Russophobic, anti-Christian, Nazis, perverted, satanic, Zionistic, nationalistic, etc. Gay, LGBT, like gay. And they use those narratives to justify their aggression against us. At the same time, our Western friends have been referring, and I've heard so many times in the past 10 years, have been referring to us Ukrainians as too homogenous or too white, or too sexist, too traditional, too racist, too religious, too xenophobic, too I don't know, anti-Christian, too militaristic, too nationalistic, and all that. So, and in my opinion, the folks in the West, especially those who've made those assumptions about Ukrainians, they have let fear and ignorance and exceptionalism and post-imperial trauma and a false sense of security and even tribalism take over and stand in the way of their values and most importantly delivering on what they have promised. And to them, I want to remind that we have a president who is Jewish, we have a defense minister who is Muslim, and we have a commander-in-chief of the armed forces who was born in Russia. You know, and I believe it was Timothy Snyder who recently said, I'm not quoting him, but I most definitely, you know, I heard him say that. He said, "Wake me up when we in the United States have a Jewish president and a Muslim Secretary of Defense and a Mexican commander-in-chief." So what's your take on diversity in Ukraine?
Maybe I'll start. You know, it's always historical perspective. You know, right now, as we see situation with diversity in Ukraine, it is like 100% great than it was, I don't know, 20 years ago with our Soviet legacy and all what we had back then. You know, when it comes to different ethnicities, you know, social groups and genders. But now I see myself and, you know, my group, we see that things are changing dramatically, and especially during the war. And this is interesting fact that before the war, I consider the war started in 2014 when Crimea was occupied, right? We're talking 22 as a full-scale invasion, but before it was like almost 10 years of Russia's being, you know, threatening us, and we were under the war. So basically, during these 10 years, we have dramatical changes when it comes to diversity, and it both when it comes to, you know, government officials, when it comes to rhetoric, when it comes to legislation, when it comes to average ordinary citizens, Ukrainians, who are actually now changing their behaviors when it comes to different types of diversities. But at the same time, you know, Russia's propaganda and disinformation, they use these narratives in order to, you know, change Western's I mean vision and views regarding Ukraine. Basically, they took half truth, half which is not truth at all, mixing it up and cooking up propaganda. And yeah, we do have some nationalistic groups, but they are not everywhere, right? As in every society, there is, I don't know, maybe 1% of population who actually nationalist, right?
And
On
if I
their,
may
yeah,
interrupt you for 1 second, just to
yeah,
make
it's
our
just,
conversation live, you know,
yeah,
more lively.
very, very short. Yeah, or you go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
just look at it. Only like less than 3% of nationalistic parties have made it to Ukrainian parliament ever. You know, they're not even born.
Yeah,
As
yeah,
opposed to some European countries which have parliaments where you have
correct.
the far rights dominating by 20, 30, 50%.
Absolutely. So our nationalist parties, far right parties, all time they have from 1 to 2% of votes, and this is kind of indication uh, how much people are, you know, following and are under this far right agenda, right? But this is enough to see a couple of people, you know, marching with the fires for Russian propaganda is enough in order to paint Ukraine as a nationalist and traditionalist white supremacy country. But it's not true right now, at least, you know.
Exactly. And I'm already seeing how, especially American politicians are exploiting, what's happening in Ukraine and using the Russian narratives to really tell their voters about what's really happening in Ukraine. And oftentimes it's just nonsense. Viktor, what about you? How do you see diversity through your optics? Because it's also, a bit more complicated for a country like Ukraine. Let's not think that everything is beautiful and nice in Ukraine when it comes to tolerance and acceptance. And we have a question from Allison in the Q&A. How accepting are your fellow Ukrainian military members of your sexual orientation? So I know you have lots of stories to say about that. But if you can maybe start with your assessment of how we're doing in Ukraine in terms of assessment.
Well, I became one of the first openly gay military in Ukraine. I did my coming out in 2019. So when I did it, I had issues. I had problems. Yeah, I was even attacked once by an Orthodox priest near a monastery in those times. But afterwards, I called to other guys and ladies who belonged to LGBT community and who belonged to military community as well. I convinced them to make their coming outs as well. We communicated with media. Media passed that to our society. And by such steps, our union, our organization was making changes. Of course, together with other LGBT organizations. So step by step, year by year, we came to an immense level of inclusion towards LGBT people in the Ukrainian society. I remember when in 2016, sociology researchers stated that Ukrainians only 25 or 26% of Ukrainians are inclusive towards LGBT people. Recent research of National Democratic Institute in Ukraine, which they made in 2024 or 23, I don't remember. This research states that 73% of Ukrainians are against discrimination of LGBT people, 72 are for equal rights for LGBT people, yeah, and 59 supports a bill of civil partnerships to LGBT people. So, what I want to say that we, civil society of Ukraine, we are making changes. We are working hard to enlighten, to change opinions of the Ukrainian society, and we are doing many successful steps. Yeah. And also I wanted to, to say a story regarding our Minister of Defense, Mr. Umerov. Mr. Umerov belongs to Crimean Tatar community. Yeah, he is a Muslim. He's Tatar himself, and not so long ago, he, as a minister, signed officially a letter of support to civil partnership bill. And his letter of support as a minister unblocked the bill in the parliament committees. So now the bill is passed to a different committee, which is now making a decision. So that is a bright example of how, communities in Ukraine, civil society in Ukraine are cooperating, following European democratic values of acceptance and inclusion and dignity.
Roman, may I add here just a couple of statistics, very briefly. So
Absolutely.
basically, yeah, I think every 2 years we do have a polling amongst Ukrainians about social distancing. Which ethnicity groups, social groups you don't want to deal with or be neighbor with or be part of the family with. And many years, like 15 years ago, it was that the least, I would say, least that I want, for example, for people to see a neighbor or family member was Roma people and Crimean Tatars, and also LGBTQI people and drug users. So basically, those four groups are considered to be kind of pariah in the society. Not, yeah, they are in our society, they exist, but we don't want to make any deals with them. But now we see that this percentage is, dramatically changed. And we see that Crimean Tatars now in in the end of this list, together with the LGBTQI community and with others. Still Roma almost in the first place. And we need to work more on this with the Ukrainian society and drug users. Yeah, that's never changed basically. But other ethnicity groups, yeah, social groups, I think things are changing.
Yeah. And again, it's a belated disclaimer that I should have made at the very beginning of our webinar, is just, by inviting Ayder, who represents, Crimean Tatar population, even though, like, there are many other Crimean Tatars who can represent their community. And also Viktor, who proudly represents the LGBTQ community, doesn't mean that there are no other additional communities and ethnic group and minorities or majorities living in Ukraine, for that matter. And I'm glad that you, Ayder, just to acknowledge that. And it was really impossible for me to think of, like, how many people we should really invite to a webinar to present a more or less accurate picture of what's really happening. It's impossible. So that's basically my belated disclaimer, combined with apologies. But I think you can still see that both Ayder and Viktor are genuine in their assessment of the diversity situation in Ukraine, regardless of which group we're talking about. And I'm glad. Once again, thank you for making that point. Viktor, I want to get back to you for a second. It's funny that you said that an Orthodox priest attacked you right outside of the monastery. And I just yesterday I read an article about one infamous MAGA person spreading information about discrimination against the Christians in Ukraine, and therefore the Americans should really support Putin as he's fighting a war against the ungodly people, and that there's massive discrimination against Christians in Ukraine. But that, I'm not gonna dwell on that any longer. But when it comes to diversity in Ukraine, and you mentioned that the defense minister, who's a Crimean Tatar, recognized the aspirations of the LGBT community, which is great. But the only thing you need to do, kind of like see how Russian media responded to that. You just like type it in Russian, and all you see like thousands of articles saying, okay, now Ukraine is gonna create the LGBTQ army and send gay people into the war, something like that. And by the time, as I'm saying that, I'm hearing the air raid sirens. So whoever's from Ukraine and feeling unsafe, I don't really know what's going on, whether it's ballistic missiles or not. But if it is, feel free to leave this seminar and go to a shelter. But we'll continue with your permission. So again, when it comes to Russian media and propaganda, I mean, they use these things and they blow it out of proportion to tell their own version of diversity in Ukraine. And I've found that they have been really successful at tailoring the narratives that are both pleasing to the far right and the far left. How in your opinion, how does Russian propaganda exploit diversity in Ukraine? What have you observed?
Mm-hmm. This is a question to me? Yep.
Yes, please.
Well, there are many fakes which Russia produces regarding LGBT community in Ukraine. Yeah, as you've mentioned, they are creating fakes about LGBT battalion is created in the Ukrainian army. They also created like fakes regarding LGBT military as perverts who are raping the Poles. Yeah, and by these fake news, they are heating hatred of like common Russians towards Ukrainian democracy. They want to show to common Russians that if Ukraine will win, NATO will win. Their next step will be to invade Moscow, yeah, and to make all their kids gay, yeah. So I read such a narrative multiple times in Russian Telegram propaganda channels. Yeah, Skabeyeva also states such things. Skabeyeva is a famous Russian propagandist. But well, we are only laughing about such fake news because they are awkward and they don't they are not doing us any harm, you know, in Ukraine. We're just doing what we are doing, and that is all.
Thank you. And I still look forward to you giving me a patch of your unit with a unicorn. I think it
A
was really cool. Yeah, yeah.
I promise I will.
Thank you. Ayder, what has your experience been when it comes to the patterns that you see when it comes to Russians exploiting the diversity in Ukraine to communicate what they want to, including our partners?
Yeah, I'll take, another angle. It's ethnic diversity. They talking always about, and especially language issue, right? Because they saying that Russian English is language is under attacks in Ukraine, and it is not protected, and people are not allowed to speak Russian, not allowed to use the Russian language, and this is far, far, far away from the truth, I would say, because I see in Kiev a lot of people speaking, both in Russian and Ukrainian language, using both. Almost all Ukrainians are bilingual by default, by the history, by the schools, and and everybody uses both languages freely. At the same time, I see that, and this is I think great that in public life we more and more use Ukrainian language, and this is good. That this is protection of the country, protection of sovereignty. At the same time, privately you can use whatever language you can or you want, and this is one Russian propaganda regarding ethnicities and languages. So basically, that Russian and other languages, minority languages, and Hungarian language, for example, Slovak language, and other languages are under the threat in Ukraine. At the same time, they talking that, for example, in Crimea, they almost created a whole holy land for all ethnic groups, whereas peace and respect and diversity and whatnot, and they always referring Russians, I mean, to previous history and saying, you see, during 25 years of Ukrainian independence and Ukraine being ruling in Crimea, Crimean Tatars were, without own schools, without own language protected, right? No books in Crimean Tatar language, nothing. And they saying, we Russians, we did everything for you guys. here you go, your language is protected by constitution, we have legislation, whatnot, but this is not true. So it is on paper, it is. But in fact, from 15 Crimean Tatar schools opened during independent Ukraine, 0 left in Russia when it comes to, occupied Russian Crimea. No Ukrainian language is allowed to be used, despite the fact that it is on the paper. So basically, they just perverting everything and saying that, see, we're good, we respect both ethnicities, languages, and whatnot. But in the end of the day, that it is not true, basically not true.
Yep. Thank you. And I see how some of these narratives created in Russia and spread throughout the world, they actually work. And
True.
I found, like, for instance, the far left being really susceptible to the misinformation or disinformation about the so-called internationalism that exists in Russia. They easily fall for this narrative. I also heard, like, about a year ago, I was visiting the United States with the Ukrainian delegation of mayors, and we were invited to speak in front of university professors at a U.S. college. And one of them asked me, shouldn't Ukrainians have considered the moods and interests of the Russian-speaking population in the Crimea back in 2014? And they should have, in her opinion. But because we did not, that led to the occupation of the Crimea. That woman did not know anything about the Crimean Tatars. And obviously, whenever I hear claims, people like, well, they speak Russian, therefore they must have feelings for Russia or for Putin, or affiliate with the Russian populations. And my counter argument to that would be, like, especially to the English-speaking audience, just because you live in America and speak English, do you mean that you're waiting for the British Navy to come and save you? So that kind of leads me to the question, and it probably was a bad example, but how can we, Ukrainians, and us, the audience on this call, because we have many people from around the world, how can we be more effective in educating others about diversity in Ukraine? If you have an answer.
Yeah, but my answer is very simple. We should produce short stories, personal stories, because nowadays people don't want to see, to hear something long. I mean, no long reads and analytics, but people do appreciate some personal stories. So I do believe that personal stories with history, some history narratives, will provide more information than state so-called strategic communication efforts. Because we know that state sometimes is overplay many things, and Ukrainian officials doing the same job as many, governments across the world, using too much using Stratcom for this. I do believe that personal contacts, personal stories, and also spreading the word through easy to communicate and easy to educate tools would be the best way how to educate people around the globe about Ukraine and diversity in the country.
Thank you. I like a personal stories connection. Viktor, do you have any additional ideas on how we can do a better job?
I fully agree. People's diplomacy is the best way, and we are promoting this people's diplomacy. Our union, our organization, our members gave so many interviews to international media. Our openly gay, lesbian, trans, non-binary soldiers were giving interviews to like Vogue to Telegraph to Guardian, it seems to me, well, to multiple media channels all over the globe. I remember I even gave an interview to Japanese and it seems to me some Indian newspapers as well. And we did it while we were fighting. So my brothers in arms were amazed when they saw me with my telephone in my hands, and talking in English all the time with some reporters whenever I could. Yeah. Uh, so and it works, it works well because when you are talking to some journalist, you are also talking about your life at the front line or life as a veteran. You're telling like stories about your personal life, etc., 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 and you are giving this picture how it is to live in Ukraine as a gay person, as a different person, yeah, in during the war, yeah. So I think it's the most effective way.
Yeah, thank you. And if you could stick with me for just a couple more minutes. So we have a comment, not a question from my friend Sergey. He's like, not a question, just saying that I'm buying some merch from Viktor's NGO as he speaks. Thanks. And Sergey lives in America. Thanks for sharing the link. Hopefully these modest proceeds will help the organization. Thank you, Sergey. I'm very pleased that you've joined us today, and not just today. And I want to go back to the question from Allison about how accepting are your Ukrainian fellow military members of your sexual orientation, because I know you have multiple stories, and you can be brutal in your answering the question.
Mm-hmm. And you can be what? Sorry, pardon?
You can be honest. You can be honest, direct.
Well,
honest.
Well, I spent 4 years at the front line. 2 years I was closeted when I served in a volunteer battalion from 2014 since 2016. Yeah, and I made my coming out when I was a civilian, as a veteran. So my brothers in arms, the majority kept silent. Then my real friends were quite supportive, and there were a certain group who were quite homophobic, and they were writing slurs in social media. But it was like 2019, as I've mentioned before. After that, when the full-scale invasion happened, I volunteered the first day to a 72nd Mechanized Brigade of Black Cossacks, and we were defending the capital. And in first days, well, guys saw a rainbow sticker on my phone, and they acknowledged that I'm gay. They asked me if I am gay, and I answered yes. Are there any problems? And they were just shocked with this information. They were talking to me. They were asking questions. How is it to be gay? Is it normal? And it seemed that I was the first gay person in their surroundings who just did coming out to them. So they were not aggressive. They were more interested, yeah, in the topic. Afterwards, well, it was like a defense of Kiev. We were heavily shelled by Russian troops. Yeah, we were in fighting, and we didn't have any medics or paramedics. Our paramedic lady, she received a shock during the first artillery shelling, so she couldn't do anything with the wounded. And during ATO, anti-terrorist operation times, yeah, when I was a volunteer in Donbass Volunteer Battalion, I received my trainings as a paramedic. So I was the only one who had this knowledge, skills, and I was the only one who was providing first aid to the wounded. And guys appreciated that a lot. Yeah, so I proved that I'm like a good person, a good friend. I proved that I was a good professional to my brother in arms, and they were quite accepting, well, from the start towards me. So afterwards, I spent 2 years with the 72nd Brigade. In the infantry, I was taking part in assault operations together with everybody. I was holding the line in the trenches. Then I was promoted to a platoon paramedic, and I was providing first aid under shelling. Also, I was involved in fighting with Russians as well. So my guys, they were always supportive and quite inclusive toward my gay identity. Only once I had a case when a guy approached to me. He didn't know that I'm gay. He was talking to me normally. He was from a different unit. But then he said that I remember your face from somewhere. And I just said, like, I have no idea. Maybe we've just met somewhere in Kyiv. And then he recalled that I'm like a gay LGBT activist. And he was amazed. He did a few steps away from me, and he said, like, I don't want to talk to you no longer. I know who you are. Yeah, and he was mumbling some nuisance. And that was the only case when I met an openly homophobic person who said homophobic things in my face. So, but in my brigade, I didn't have any problems. Of course, we have more than 400 people, guys and ladies, in our union, 350 men, and like then 25, it seems to me, ladies, and 25 trans people. They have a different chats, so I don't know the exact amount at the moment. And of course, they from time to time, some issues of homophobia in the Ukrainian army arise. Sure. And our community tries to help. Yeah. So as an NGO, we work with the donors who are providing funds for our human rights defense projects. And we are able to hire a lawyer and a psychologist who are working with the guys and ladies, yeah, who met issues with homophobia. Also, we are talking with чиновники, with MPs,
yeah,
authorities, officials, yeah, with the representatives of Ministry of Defense. We have the connection with the Ministry of Defense, and they involve. They are not interested in such cases, yeah, to provide to continue in to continue to happen in the Ukrainian army. So the authorities are trying to help us, yeah. So, and it is very good that we created such a community of LGBT military, so we can help each other in such cases. Well, and we everything we are doing, and such cases we are posting, yeah, on our social media. So I invite everybody who is interested to follow our Instagram page, Twitter. Well, we are also present in TikTok and Telegram as well, Facebook as well.
Thank you, Viktor, for telling your story and for being honest. And I think you've made quite a big impact on a lot of your fellow soldiers by sharing your identity, by telling about your experiences, and they've learned more from you than they would have from the media or from their homophobic friends.
After one of the fights, one of the first fights, my commander of battalion approached me and he said, you changed my mind, like regarding gay people. And it was, well, for me, it was like receiving a medal, Yeah.
Yeah, and to our audience, I would like to remind something that I've said multiple times, is that our armed forces, is not only the people who were civilians just yesterday, from different walks of life, but it's also sort of like a melting pot, in the sense where it's the highest concentration of Ukrainian civil society in one trench, basically, where they can not just pretend that they're not listening to you or not hearing you, where they can just turn off their phone and not see the bubble that is annoying. You have to rely on the people in your trench. You have to constantly be present. You have to listen to your stories. And it's through these experiences, and I'm only praying that as many of them will survive this brutal war and come back, so we can start rebuilding Ukraine. But also, like, it's life-changing experiences all of these people are going through.
Entrepreneurs, builders, taxi drivers, what's not, educated, uneducated, smart, stupid, in one trench, and you need to approach all of them, and you need to be involved in one fight, to make successful operations together. So you need to know how to listen to each other. Yeah. So it's
Thank you.
a fantastic experience, serving in the Ukrainian army.
Thank you. We have not much time left. Obviously, if people are willing to stay on this webinar, they can. We have one comment from Janine and multiple questions from anonymous attendee, and then I have like a closing question at the very end, which I've been saving to let you answer the questions from our audience. So, Janine, who is a former Peace Corps volunteer. Oh, we have a question from Carol as well. And she's basically saying, thank you, Viktor, Ayder, and Roman, for such a great webinar, and all of you for your efforts to bring us these webinars. Thank you, Carol. Your words mean a lot to me. Janine wrote, something that many Americans do not understand is that when Ukraine was controlled by the USSR and then by Russia, all official business and all education was conducted in Russian. So of course, anyone over the age of 25 had to learn Russian, no matter what language may have been spoken at home. The cities became Russian speaking by default. Okay, thank you. There's a lot of truth to that, but it's not as black and white, in my opinion.
Can I answer the question? Sorry, Roman.
Is that?
Well, can I answer this statement or question? Well,
you can react to it.
Actually, I belong to a military family. So my great-granddad was a colonel in World War II. He took Budapest in Hungary as an artillerist. Then my grandfather was a jet pilot, and my father also served in the Soviet army. All of them were speaking Russian. Me too, I was speaking Russian since 7th grade of school. But I finished my school in independent Ukraine. And I remember distinctly that I decided to change Russian language to Ukrainian when I started receiving lessons of history of Ukraine and literature of Ukraine. So when I acknowledged what Great Famine is, famine, Holodomor, the atrocities of Stalin regime, the atrocities of Russian Empire, the slavery during Russian Empire, serfdom, all of this stuff. I decided that, well, it is better to return to my roots, to Ukrainian language. And I just decided to switch. And my father was quite supportive regarding that, although he was a Russian speaker, all the time.
I think many of us were, so was I, and two of my teenage son, when they go to school, they're the minority. We're living in Kiev, and they're the minority because they speak Ukrainian. Most of the kids in their classrooms, they speak Russian still, after 10 years of fighting the Russians. And I just want to go back to the question that several questions that are lined up from an anonymous attendee. And maybe Ayder can handle those. And then what I also like to hear from Ayder is like whether you have a chance to practice your language, because we keep saying we can talk about Ukrainian and Russian, but there are other multiple languages that exist in Ukraine that people speak in their homes. So the questions are, will Ukrainians try to be a more monolingual country in the future rather than continuing the dual language use that has been present? And how would a shift toward monolingualism go?
I think that despite Russian propaganda that Ukrainians are forced by the government and nationalists to, use Ukrainian language publicly and privately, I think that monolinguistics is coming naturally, I would say, because of change of generations, because of education provided in Ukrainian language, because of services available in both languages, and especially now in Ukrainian, because it was a time, despite everything, all, for example, internet services were provided in Russian in Ukraine. And it was more convenient for people to talk and to discuss everything in Russian. So now things are changing, and changing dramatically from, first of all, from mental perspective, not because people do not know Ukrainian language or Russian, because mentally then switching for another language and using them it more and more. And I do believe that Ukraine will be a multi-language country, despite that Ukrainian will be one official language. And this is part of, survival of the state. If we will not be able to keep the one language, I mean, Ukrainian as state official language, we will have problems for sure as a political nation, because, language is a specific part of this, a valuable part. When it comes to Crimean Tatar language, things are very bad here. I mean, because of, 75 years of absence of education in Crimean Tatar language, we lost our language, I would say. We do speak basic language, Crimean Tatar language in our families, but more and more other languages. So basically Russian and Ukrainian, both in home and in our homes, and also outside. And this is a tragedy for Crimean Tatars. We do try to use our language within community, but it is hard from generation to generation, because education was absolutely, out, I mean, in Crimean Tatar language. It was a blast when Crimea was under Ukraine, so we had schools, and it was a hope that we will, revival our language back. But now it's not anymore visible. I mean, for Crimea for sure, but in Ukraine there are a lot of opportunities, but still there are a lot of challenges. I mean, in order to revive the language.
Thank you for saying that. I think, we keep talking about how it all began with Crimea 10 years ago and how it must all end in Crimea when we talk about Ukrainian victory. I think in order to, to be really truthful and sincere in our wishes, I think it would be interesting, if not mandatory, to introduce the study of the Crimean Tatar language, at least in the basic kind of level in the secondary school system.
Yeah, and it was an experiment back in 2010, I believe, when it was started as a not mandatory though, but in many Crimean schools, a Crimean Tatar language was introduced, and many students actually went there and started studying Crimean Tatar language. I mean, not Crimean Tatars, so Ukrainians, Russians, and others. And it went well. And Russia's occupation just, interrupted everything, all these natural processes to become, something different than it is now.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, we started this webinar with a question: how do you see Ukraine's victory? Now, I would like to conclude our webinar with a different question, but it kind of transpires from the first question. How do you see Ukraine after our victory? And again, we're speaking about diversity. So how do you see Ukraine after our victory, considering A, we are going to be fewer in numbers, a lot fewer. B, we're going to be a lot more traumatized by the war. And C, unless the so-called Russian Federation falls apart, we're going to have like a permanent threat on our northern and eastern borders. We already know that a lot of Ukrainians have left Ukraine. We're talking about millions. We don't know how many Ukrainians are left, including Crimean Tatars in Ukraine. We would want to assume that in order to continue rebuilding and growing economically after the war, we would need some man and women power. We need some people. So these people must come from somewhere. And I doubt that those Ukrainians who have left Ukraine will eventually return. So what can we as Ukrainians do to make Ukraine more attractive to people who are not Ukraine, who do not identify as Ukrainians? And what can we do to be more inclusive? If that's what you think we should do. Viktor.
Interesting question. Of course, as a borderland, we cannot omit some sort of militarization of our society. So everybody needs to know how to defend our country. Just if you want peace, prepare for war. Yeah. Well, I am a pacifist by myself. Yeah. Just you won't find a bigger pacifist as a veteran. Seeing all the corpses, seeing death, killing people is a very hard burden. I don't want to see it any longer. But I know that just if you don't want a war to happen, having such neighbors as Russia, having such neighbors as China, well, it is far away, yeah, but who knows what can happen tomorrow. Then having such neighbors as some other difficult states, yeah, Ukraine should be always prepared to defend itself. So after the victory, I see Ukraine as a well-prepared state with a well-educated society. By educated, I mean society should have a good literacy of how to communicate with veterans, how to communicate with the military people, our society should learn how to accept all the identities of the people who will be from which our Ukrainian society will consist of. I mean, political society. There are many challenges, yeah, but only in education, in constant education, I see the key. I see the key of our successful future after the victory. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Viktor.
Roman, I think you kind of alluded to the issue of, that potentially migrants from other countries may come to Ukraine in order to, to bring some power, I mean, manpower in order, or whatever power in order to, change the population, right? Because we have depopulation issue now in Ukraine, and to restore population is going to be an issue for Ukraine as a state. And immigrants can bring some ideas, culture, and their work power. But I think that Ukraine is not ready for that yet, and will not be several years, because we are now good in tolerance and diversity respect when it comes to our domestic own ethnic groups. I mean, Bulgarians, Hungarians, Crimean Tatars, Greeks, and other groups whom we know because of centuries being together, living together, having, conflicts, but also, having good days together. And social groups, which are, partially, they are part of traditional Ukrainian society. When we'll have people from abroad settling in Ukraine, different color, different culture, I would think that it's going to be challenging for Ukrainian society. And these will need additional, additional preparation for people to be educated more, to know about other cultures and about other countries, because we need to know more about the world, as others as well, So for me, I would say that us as the, Ukrainian society and Ukrainian civil society, we should start preparing our people, Ukrainians, that we need more diversity, we need more tolerance to any groups which may appear, except far rights and, sorry to say this, idiots, who will be, threatening our state. But otherwise, we should be open for everyone. But education matters.
Yep. Thank you. And I just remembered a few years ago, and it seems like a long time ago, but it was 3 years ago, 3 or 5 or 6 years ago, that at least in the bigger cities of Ukraine, at least in Kiev, I could see the influx of people from other countries. Like for instance, you order a taxi and there's
Afghanistan,
there's a high chance that people will not speak a Ukrainian or Russian or any other language, or English, basically. There's if you go to a barber shop, you see people from Kurdistan or and then a lot of them,
right.
and a few of them would speak the language. And again, I've seen and I've met a lot of Chinese who are delivering food, like food services and stuff, and it happened, but I don't recall any of the police reports on the Ukrainians kind of like resistance to these migration initiatives. But we'll have to see. It's really I know it's a speculation, but we do have like one comment, I think, and a couple of questions in the Q&A. So we have so another question from Janine. I understood that education grades 1 to 12 is now conducted in Ukrainian. Is this not true?
Yes.
True. Yeah,
it is true. Yeah.
The question from John, thank you for this great webinar and the whole series. Thank you, John. Your words mean a lot to us and everyone who's involved in organizing these, preparing. Question from Kyle. I was just in Ukraine and saw the Crimean Tatar channel, but it was not always in Crimean Tatar. Sometimes it was Ukrainian and Russian, depending on the presenter or the interviewee. So that was a comment, and I guess that you Ayder spoke about it a few minutes ago. And a comment from my colleague Tamara. I would like to thank dear guest speakers Ayder and Viktor for their amazing, moving, and so powerful stories. Thank you for your insights and truth, which you shared with us. Thank you for what you do for Ukraine. I'm so glad I have joined this great meeting and now have a privilege to listen to you. Thank you, Tamara. We have a comment from Violetta. Just comment, dear Ayder, I like your idea regarding welcoming the new labor migrants from Central Asia and other countries. Thank you for a comment, Violetta. And thank you for coming to our webinars every week. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions, which means that we are concluding our webinar. And I'd like to thank everyone for staying a few minutes longer. That's usually the case. And I want to, I'm really amazed at how, that to me, the fact that you find our webinars meaningful. So thank you. And I want to thank Viktor and Ayder for being so agreeable, but being honest, being truthful, and for sharing their amazing stories. I look forward to seeing each of you in person at some point, if our schedules collide, and catching up. And thank you in person for your participation. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. A tremendous thank you to Ayder Khalilov and Viktor Pylypenko for joining us today. I know that you're both very busy people doing a lot of work, and it just means so much that you're willing to take this time to talk to us and to our audience that comes every week. So, дуже дякую, and thank you just so much. And thank you to our audience as well. Many of you join us every Friday since October of last year. We're tremendously grateful. It matters that you're keeping attention on Ukraine. It matters that you're learning more about the real Ukraine and the stories of what's going on there. We're just tremendously grateful for